loyal community at that. Whether you're an individual media or a brand, you've got power. Community as a concept dates back from the earliest civilizations. However, online communities have risen in popularity and influence over the past 2 decades and are rapidly becoming the linchpins to a company's success. Our next speaker, Elizabeth Toby, is the head of community engagement at one of my favorite websites of the internet, Medium. She has built and rebuilt communities for video game and tech companies for over a decade, and will dive into how communities evolve, the challenges we face today, and how community can make or break your business and facilitate product decisions. Please give her a warm round of applause.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. I'm Elizabeth, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how community can help influence and make more powerful your product. I actually did crowdsource this title on Twitter. They are much wittier than me. It was a much more long-winded and difficult title before, so just one example of how community is actually much better than me. So let's get started about the history of community. As I was introduced, it dates back to really the beginning of civilization. Think about a village. A group of people brought together with a common interest, a common cause, a purpose, but not a homogeneous group. They're around a campfire. They're brought together for something and bound to something, but they're not all alike. Take that idea, fast forward to the late 80s, early 90s with the rise of the internet when online communities really started taking hold. They started with bulletin boards and with multi-user dungeons, also known as MUDs, which were some of the earliest online video games. Again, like that village, these people were from all walks of life, diverse set of ideas, but they're brought together with a common purpose, a common interest, common goal. Going into the history of me starts in early 2006. I started working in community for a video game company, and when I first got it started, my world looked a lot like this. This probably looks like a very early version of what we'd think of as content marketing today, but for us, it was really about bringing people to an official hub, getting them together, giving them regular information, and then having forums so they could talk amongst themselves and continue to come back. But it was really about a megaphone approach. We were blasting out that information to people, hoping that they would stick around. 2006, 2007, that was also when we started seeing the rise of social media. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. One of the important things about that is that we saw the importance of evangelists, of ambassadors, and we saw the need for interactivity. More than just giving people information and being the official sources of truth of a company, we needed to be talking with them in those conversations and in those forums. So this little goofy GIF is one of the great examples that I have. We were watching and listening to what our community was saying, their jokes, the thoughts of the day, the trends that were going on in the industry, and this is a short snippet of a video that we made to promote something. You don't really need to know the context of it to understand why this probably got millions of views across tons of channels, dozens of press hits, but for me, most impressively, a ton of community goodwill. This idea came out of the community. We weren't just pitching a game and selling a product, but we were making them part of it, and this was clearly made by community love. And if you are wondering, yes, those are actually my offices, and my VP of marketing forgot that we were filming, so we did scare the crap out of him. Interactivity goes beyond just videos that are riffing on things that the community is talking about. This is a screenshot of a website that I made for an alternate reality game. This went on for a little over a year, updating every single day with information, stories, clues, puzzles. It was literally built to get the community to come back and be together to solve things and move the story forward. This was probably one of the most harrowing years of my life. I wouldn't recommend having something that needs to update every single day and built on trying to, beat the hive mind and the intelligence of the internet at large. But it was super important to us because we weren't just putting out content, we were listening to what they were saying, what they were doing, and changing our direction based on what moved them and how they theorized the story would flow. This next picture probably looks a lot like the last one, because this is where we went old school, and we took online communities and we made them real-life communities. That alternate reality game didn't just stay on the web. We built it out, and we brought it to conferences and conventions. This one's San Diego Comic-Con. It was an identical replica of the online space, and when we updated it, we would have people come in first from the community, maybe sometimes have to work in tandem with what people were finding online, and work together, feel physical puzzles, have to solve them and open them and find clues. This is really notable to me because the power of this brought together dozens of friendships that I know of personally and at least 2 marriages. And that's kind of awesome, right? Because the idea of this is not just a product that brought people together and kept them together and bound them together, but it was that spark and that passion. It's what made this home for them. For your community, no matter what you're giving to them, you're selling to them, you're facilitating a community for, the real power is in when they say, this is where I want to be, these are my people, this is where my home is. So I said a little bit about social media earlier. In 2012, social media was undeniably a thing. Companies were using it in a very official way. Video games, again, being a little ahead of the curve, had a lot of official social media strategies. It's not exactly what I'm going to talk about here. In this instance, I had a special edition coming up, and someone tweeted me saying, how big is the box? So I did what any rational person would do. I grabbed our prototype, I put my dog in it, took a picture, put the picture on Imager, and then I tweeted it back to the fan. Apparently, I underestimated the power of putting dogs in boxes because this picture got over 8 million views. And that's really cool in its own right, but what was really powerful about that was a Reddit user found the picture, put it up, and the thread that he created was one of the top threads on Reddit. I think it held the #1 spot in the gaming subreddit for several days. And yeah, sure, it spawned a bunch of press. It got a lot of views, it got a lot of buzz. But this was the single most important thing we could have done to help that special edition, and it wasn't done through official channels. It was done in 10 minutes to answer a fan question. It was not me that really did it. Sure, they're my channels that were the host of the original picture, but the power was from the community. It was by listening to them and then letting them be the ones who spread the word. I'm the facilitator, but I am not the person who's actually doing it. I'd fully given the hand to the community and said, go with it. I'm just giving you what you need. In 2014, I took a jump from video games and online world, and I went directly to a platform. And I was the director of community and support at Tumblr. And this was really interesting for me because it was the first time I was working with a product that was actually the community. They were one and the same. And that moment for me was strange because when I would go to professional conferences, people would talk about things that I knew and loved, you know. How do you make your customer a community member? How do you build good tools and platforms for a community hub? And none of that stuff really pertained to me anymore because the two things were linked. Everything that I did for work, for support or community, happened on my product. All of my customers, by default, were my community members. And when I work at Medium now, there's very much the same feeling. The product of a platform and the product of a video game are at the same time completely the same and completely different. And a lot of the things that I learned from all of those interactivity and trying to draw the community in and empower them to build games made me so useful in building community at Tumblr and now at Medium. I'm going to sidestep a little here and talk about another thing that has really increased in visibility and veracity over the last couple of years online, and that's internet toxicity. No matter what community you have, no matter how well you build it, there's going to be bad stuff that happens. And with online communities, social media being so ubiquitous now, and the power that comes from being able to speak online and find your people, amazing good things happen with it, but also a lot of bad can come with it. I'm again going to talk a little bit more about this later, but it's really important to note that it's a thing that's out there, it's important, it's not going away. And we talk about using community to build product and product to build community. It's something we have to get in front of and think of as something that's a proactive thing that we have to deal with aggressively and by our own actions. So to speak in terms of Medium, where I am now, this is the highlight I want to take away right now. Community is the end and the beginning of your company. Without them, your product doesn't have a purpose. This is quite literal when you think of Medium or Tumblr. There isn't anything without our community. There's literally no content for those platforms. But think about Nike. Yeah, they'd have shoes, but without the people on the feet to run, to hike, to walk, there's no purpose for them to exist. There's no purpose for their company or product. So when we think about Medium, and when I do my job working community, we go back to our roots. We have creators and we have readers. We have people who have content and they want to find an audience to consume it. We have people who want to learn and read and talk with other people. We need to make sure they can get connected to the people that they need. So for that, we think about starting a conversation. This is one example of a pretty impressive post that we had in the last couple of months. Face value, it looks like Ross and an article about Friends, right? But it got over 10,000 recommendations and almost 1,000 responses. And while those are great metrics, that's not actually what I'm proud of. What I'm proud of is the stuff over to the right, which is about all of those responses. Some of them got 800 recommendations on their own right and 29 responses, and from there you can imagine how the conversation branched out. When you think about a normal online post these days, people might say, don't read the comments, or it'll just be like, cool, or that's not cool, or maybe something else. But they're usually very high-level topical conversations. They don't really go deep. Some of these responses were as long as the original post, and they created side conversations that were just as important as the thing the first person said. Think of a cocktail party. The person who starts talking first isn't the most important person. Everyone else who responds and the side conversations, the tangents that spin out from that, they're just as equally important. And so when we're building the product, we're thinking about what the community wants, and we're empowering for that conversation. We want to be able to elevate those voices, have really meaningful, respectful, deep conversations. We also want people to be able to make a difference. One of the things that's important to us at Medium is being able to elevate a voice. Whether you're a big professional writer who writes every day, or an amateur, someone who's never written before, only wants to write once a month, once a year, or you do it for a huge publication, we want you to be able to find your audience and find your voice. And that really translates to a product that works no matter who your end user is, because there's never going to be just one user. This example, you may know her. Her name is Talia Jane. She wrote an open letter to her CEO at Yelp. She was a customer service representative, about how difficult it was to live on the salary she was making. If you ask Talia herself, she never thought her words would get the pickup that they did. And probably if she'd put this on her personal blog, it wouldn't have actually gotten that pickup. And that's because we were designing for making sure that people could find the audience that they wanted and they needed, and that they could start those conversations. And for us, on Medium, yeah, we want people here every day. We want them here all the time for as long as possible. But really, the huge benefit of Talia didn't happen just on Medium. We got several thousand recommendations, several thousand responses, huge conversations happened. But the ripples were far beyond our platform, spawning conversations about important stuff. Millennials, living wage, what it's like to be a lower-level person working in a big organization, tech companies. Actually, Talia, in no small part, was probably one of the reasons why Yelp decided to raise their wages for their customer service reps and increase their benefits. It wasn't just because of her, but she started something big, and she wasn't famous. She didn't have a following. She hadn't been writing on Medium for a long time, but she could still make a difference. And this is where something that I do every day comes in. I started at Medium about 4 months ago, and my whole job is about engaging the community, growing new communities, bringing them on the platform, and getting the ones that already exist on our platform to be better and more strong and interconnected and sticking around longer. But that doesn't mean that we started community at Medium 4 months ago. We started it 4 years ago when we started the company. It's interwoven in every department and everything that we do. which is pretty sweet and made my job a lot easier, but it's also very important in impacting your product. But no matter how well you build your product and how much you weight it towards those positive conversations and those interactions that you want with your community, bad stuff's going to happen. There are going to be trouble spots sometimes. And this is where you need to role model for the behaviors that you want. At Medium, how we find success, it's through transparency, it's through being responsive, being honest, reducing the friction between the community and the company whenever possible. These examples are some public posts that I made. You can tell I'm really a fan of dogs, sorry. And these are about plagiarism and about harassment that happened on our platform. Now, the point of this exercise wasn't to do whatever the person who first reported the problem wanted us to do. It was about us to take a look at what they said, get as diverse a set of eyes at our company looking into it, get us discussing it and challenging our own assumptions, and then whatever came out of that, reporting it back openly and quickly and transparently to our users to start a conversation. If you want to role model good behavior, if you want to tell your community to do something or act a certain way, if you want to exhibit something from them, you've got to do it yourself. You've got to lead by example. And that can sound really scary for communities and for companies because you don't want to talk about the things that go wrong. You don't want to talk about something when something bad happens. There's vulnerability there, but in that vulnerability, there's power. If you treat your community as you want them to treat each other and to treat you, there's a respect and a power and an honesty and a trust, and it makes your company not that opaque wall, but you guys become partners together. This has worked really well for us, and I'm really proud to say that even before I started, the conversations on Medium were pretty respectful, really open. What we wanted is something that's not an overly serious platform. We wanted something where you could talk to all different kinds of people from all different points of view. We didn't want to create an echo chamber. That's the antithesis to what makes a healthy, productive community. We wanted people, though, no matter who they were in their walks of life, even if they had completely opposite opinions from each other, to be able to discuss things without devolving into name-calling or harassment. We still see that, but we deal with it very proactively, both through building a product that weights away from that and shows community what to do and how we want them to act, and also doing it ourselves through human touch. So now that I've talked about a lot of the things that I do right now to make community as productive as possible, here's a little bit about how I do it. I have my own goals. They're always around growth, loyalty, happiness, retention, but I always track those back to what our company needs. For us, it's about growth. It's about digging deep and conversations spreading wide. What you're looking at here is a tool that maps out conversation trees on our platform. You're seeing a great example of a conversation that went very wide, and another conversation that didn't go as wide, didn't reach as huge an audience, but as you can tell by those big circles, there's a lot of interactions to two hubs of information and conversations that really went deep and branched out among a small subset of individuals. Depending on your community, their needs are going to be very different. Their trees are probably going to look very different. We need to build a product that facilitates both kinds of conversations, and I need to be able to track what I'm doing so that I can go all the way up to our CEO and tell him how what we're doing works or doesn't work in his metrics as well as mine. In short, you have to embrace data. I say this as someone who is an English major, who focused on creative writing. I'm not a data scientist. You wouldn't think that I'm a person who would analyze something. But what you're looking at here are some of the analyses I've done and shared with the company. On the left is our internal version of Medium called Hatch, and some of the posts that I have made recently that go to the entire company. As a side note, if you guys can share conversations like this as transparently as we do, it's a huge benefit. You'll see that I talk about goals that I have, projects that are upcoming, specific projects and how they did, and retrospectives, telling people about some issues that have been going on with the community that probably not everyone in the company has time to see. You also see a word cloud there. That's a user study that I did where I asked a super open-ended question. I said, what do you want to read more of? That's such qualitative information, you would never think that I could make sense of it. But I did. I was able to break it down into a quantifiable entity so that I could actually start building campaigns that would be more useful for our community. But not only that, that information was hugely important to our product team and is actually being used right now in at least 2 new features or updates that we're doing. You can also see from that graph that's showing what we did and how activities went up. This is a good one that we have from some of the projects, because even when you're talking about, getting user growth together, you want to make sure that everything you're doing, you know what's going well, so you can do more of it, and when it's not going well, you can do less of it, or you can change your course. For me, this is about our tools on the platform, buying new tools, pitching to our data scientists and getting them to help whenever possible, running SQL queries myself. Everything that I do also tracks back to the main company goal. Because the bottom line here is, no matter what your industry or your product or your user base, these kinds of tools can work for you. And it's not just about using community to make your product better. It's about making your product better by using your community and having them be equal partners back and forth. Because you can not only empower your community by getting their words into the product, but your product team is going to feel more integrated into the users that they're serving by being able to talk to them and see what they're doing and feel like they have a real stake and partnership in what they're doing. I want to thank you so much for being here today and for talking to me. Look forward to the rest of the conference.